What if the reason your life feels heavy, confusing, and spiritually empty is because something else has taken the place that belongs to God? Most people say they believe in God, but very few have truly put Him first. And the frightening part is this: you can go to church, pray sometimes, even call yourself faithful, while secretly allowing money, relationships, fear, lust, success, or people's approval to control your heart more than God does. But when a person finally puts God first, something supernatural begins to happen. Their mind changes, their peace changes, their direction changes. Doors begin opening that no human being could open. In this video, I am going to reveal 5 life-changing things that happen when you truly put God first, and by the end, you may realize why certain battles have been attacking your life for so long. Because some blessings only enter a life where God is finally first. Stay until the end. Because the last sign may expose the exact thing that has been silently stealing your peace and blocking your spiritual growth. Now let's move to the very first sign, and this one changes everything inside a person before it ever changes anything around them. The very first thing that happens when you truly put God first is that God gives you a peace the world cannot explain. And this is powerful because most people today are searching for peace in places that were never designed to give it. They think peace comes from having more money, more attention, a better relationship, more success, or finally escaping their problems. But even after gaining those things, many people still go to sleep anxious, empty, restless, and emotionally exhausted. Why? Because the human soul was never created to survive without God at the center of it. That emptiness inside people is not always caused by a lack of success. Sometimes it is caused by a lack of God. And the moment a person truly puts God first, something begins shifting deep within them. The storms around them may not disappear immediately, but the storm inside them slowly starts calming down. Suddenly, they are no longer controlled by fear the same way they used to be. Situations that once caused panic now push them toward prayer. Problems that once destroyed their mental peace now become moments where they learn to trust God more deeply. And this kind of peace confuses people around you because it makes no logical sense. People will look at your life and wonder how you are still standing after everything you have faced. They will wonder why you are not completely broken after the betrayal, the stress, the disappointments, the delays, and the battles you survived. But what they do not understand is that when God becomes your source of peace, your stability is no longer connected to circumstances. Before, your emotions may have depended on whether life was going well or badly. If people treated you right, you felt good. If money was stable, you felt secure. If life was smooth, you felt peaceful. But the problem with depending on temporary things for peace is that temporary things always change. People change, situations change, feelings change, but God does not change. And when your heart finally understands that God is still faithful, even in difficult seasons, fear begins losing its power over you. This does not mean you never cry. It does not mean you never struggle. It does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you no longer collapse every time life becomes difficult because your soul has finally found something stronger than the storm. And honestly, some of you watching this know exactly what I am talking about because there were moments in your life when you should have completely fallen apart, but somehow God carried you through it. You may have cried in secret, you may have felt weak, you may have questioned everything, but deep down, there was still a supernatural strength keeping you alive. That was not luck. That was not coincidence. That was God sustaining you even before you fully realized He was the only peace your soul truly needed. And when a person finally puts God first, that peace becomes stronger than fear, stronger than anxiety, stronger than uncertainty, and stronger than every storm trying to destroy them. Now let's move to the second sign, and this is where many people begin realizing that God is not only changing their circumstances, He is changing them from the inside out. The second life-changing thing that happens when you put God first is that you begin losing desire for the things that were slowly destroying your soul. And this transformation is one of the clearest signs that God is truly working in someone's life, because before God becomes first, many people are trapped in cycles they secretly hate. They keep returning to the same sins, the same toxic habits, the same unhealthy relationships, the same distractions, and the same spiritual emptiness. They may smile in front of people while privately fighting battles that are draining them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And the painful part is that many people want to change, but they keep discovering that human strength alone is not enough. They try discipline, they try motivation, they try promises, but eventually they fall back into the same darkness because transformation does not begin by merely changing behavior. Real transformation begins when God starts changing the heart. And that is exactly what happens when a person truly puts Him first. Slowly, things that once controlled you begin losing their grip over your life. Conversations that once entertained you start feeling empty. Certain music, environments, and habits begin disturbing your spirit instead of feeding it. Sins that once felt pleasurable begin leaving a heaviness inside you. And at first, this process can feel confusing because you realize you are no longer comfortable in places where you once felt at home. But what is really happening is that God is separating you from the things that were poisoning your spirit. Because when the presence of God grows in your life, darkness can no longer satisfy you the same way. And many people watching this are in that exact season right now. You can feel God pulling you away from certain people, certain lifestyles, and certain desires, but part of you is still fighting the process because change feels uncomfortable. Yet what you do not realize is that God is not removing things to punish you. He is removing things that were slowly destroying your peace, your purpose, and your future. Sometimes the greatest blessing God can give a person is not adding something new, but removing what no longer belongs in their life. And when God becomes first, your cravings begin changing. You start craving peace more than attention, purity more than pleasure, purpose more than popularity, and truth more than temporary satisfaction. This is why spiritually growing people often feel lonely because they no longer fit comfortably in environments that once matched their old identity. But do not fear that loneliness because sometimes separation is proof that God is elevating your spirit. Some people are losing themselves trying to stay connected to things God is calling them away from. And the powerful truth is this: when God truly takes first place in your life, He begins breaking chains that you were never strong enough to break on your own. Addictions begin weakening, toxic desires begin fading, old mindsets begin dying, and little by little, you become a completely different person. Not because you became perfect overnight, but because the closer you get to God, the less attractive darkness becomes. Now let's move to the third sign, and this is the point where many people begin realizing that putting God first does not only change what is happening inside you, it also changes what God begins doing around you. The third life-changing thing that happens when you put God first is that God starts opening doors you could never open by yourself. And this is something powerful because there are certain blessings in life that hard work alone cannot produce. Yes, effort matters, discipline matters, faithfulness matters. But there comes a point where human ability reaches its limit, and only the favor of God can take a person further. Many people today are exhausted because they are trying to force everything to happen in their own strength. They are chasing opportunities that God never assigned to them, begging for acceptance from people who were never meant to walk with them, and fighting to keep doors open that God Himself is trying to close. But when you truly put God first, something begins changing in the way you move through life. You stop living with desperation and you start living with trust. You begin understanding that if God has planned something for your life, no human being can permanently block it. And if God removes something from your life, no amount of struggle can turn it into a lasting blessing. This changes your entire mindset because now you are no longer depending only on your own understanding. You begin trusting the God who sees the future while you can only see the moment. And one of the most beautiful things about putting God first is that later you begin realizing how many disasters God secretly protected you from. There were relationships you cried over that would have destroyed your peace. There were opportunities you begged for that would have led you away from your purpose. There were delays that frustrated you, but were actually protecting you from walking into the wrong season too early. And this is why mature faith changes the way a person reacts to closed doors. Instead of panicking every time something does not work out, you begin trusting that God's direction is wiser than your emotions. Because sometimes what feels like rejection is actually divine protection. And many people watching this can look back now and thank God for prayers He did not answer, because if He had given you everything you wanted at the wrong time, it could have ruined your future. That is why putting God first creates peace even in uncertainty, because you stop believing your life is controlled by luck, accidents, or human approval. You begin realizing that God is orchestrating things behind the scenes even when you cannot fully understand it. And suddenly, doors begin opening that make no logical sense. You meet the right people unexpectedly. Opportunities appear at the perfect moment. Certain battles you thought would destroy you somehow work together for your growth. Even your pain begins serving a purpose. And what makes this so powerful is that when God opens a door, no person can shut it. No jealousy can stop it. No betrayal can destroy it. No delay can cancel what God has already decided for your life. This does not mean life becomes perfect overnight, but it means you stop carrying the pressure of trying to control everything yourself. Because when God becomes first, you finally understand that His plans for your life are greater than anything you could force with your own hands. Now let's move to the fourth sign, and this is where a person begins experiencing one of the most powerful transformations of all. The fourth life-changing thing that happens when you put God first is that your identity becomes stronger than the opinions of people. And honestly, this is something millions of people are struggling with today, because we are living in a world where people constantly feel pressured to prove themselves. People build their identity on attention, followers, relationships, money, appearance, success, and public approval. They spend years trying to become accepted by everyone around them, yet deep inside, they still feel insecure, empty, and emotionally exhausted. Why? Because anything built on human approval will always leave a person unstable. The world changes too quickly. People praise you one day and criticize you the next. They support you while you benefit them, then disappear the moment you struggle. And when your identity depends on people, your peace will constantly rise and fall based on how others treat you. But the moment you truly put God first, something begins changing deep within your spirit. You slowly stop needing constant validation from the world because you finally begin understanding who you are in the eyes of God. And this changes everything. You no longer wake up desperate for attention. You no longer destroy your mental peace trying to impress people who are empty themselves. You no longer feel the need to shrink yourself just to fit into environments where you do not belong. Because when God becomes first, your value stops coming from public opinion and starts coming from divine truth. And there is something powerful about a person who truly knows their worth before God, because that person becomes difficult to manipulate, difficult to intimidate, and difficult to break. Not because they become arrogant, but because they are no longer emotionally controlled by every opinion around them. Many people today are living in silent bondage because their confidence is trapped inside other people's hands. One compliment makes them feel worthy, and one criticism makes them feel worthless. But when your identity is rooted in God, you stop living like a prisoner to human approval. You begin realizing that your worth was established long before people formed opinions about you. God knew your value before the world ever recognized your name. And this becomes life-changing because now rejection no longer destroys you the same way. Betrayal no longer completely crushes your spirit. Criticism no longer controls your emotions. Why? Because you understand that people's opinions cannot cancel God's purpose for your life. And many of you watching this need to hear this deeply, because you have spent too much of your life trying to earn love, acceptance, and validation from people who were never qualified to define your worth in the first place. Some of you have been shrinking your personality, hiding your gifts, and silencing your voice just to avoid rejection. But when God truly becomes first in your life, boldness begins replacing insecurity. Confidence begins replacing fear. And peace begins replacing the constant pressure to prove yourself. Because you finally understand something that changes everything. You do not need the entire world to approve of you when God has already called you chosen, valuable, and created with purpose. Now let's move to the fifth and final sign. And this may be the most life-changing one of all because this is where everything finally begins making sense. The fifth life-changing thing that happens when you put God first is that you begin walking in purpose instead of confusion. And this is important because there are millions of people alive today who are busy every single day but still feel completely lost inside. They wake up chasing goals, money, attention, relationships, and temporary success, yet deep down there is still an emptiness they cannot explain. Why? Because a person can be productive and still spiritually lost. A person can have achievements and still lack purpose. And without purpose, life eventually starts feeling meaningless, no matter how much success someone gains. That is why so many people secretly feel exhausted. They are constantly moving but have no clear direction for their soul. But when you truly put God first, something begins shifting inside your spirit. You slowly start realizing that your life is not random. Your existence is not an accident. Your gifts, your struggles, your experiences, and even your pain all carry meaning connected to a greater purpose that God planned long before you understood it yourself. And suddenly, the things you once hated about your journey begin looking different. The battles that almost broke you start producing wisdom. The pain you survived begins shaping your strength. The tears you cried in secret begin creating compassion for others who are hurting. Even your darkest seasons start revealing lessons that could never have been learned in comfort. And this changes the way you see your entire life, because now you realize God wastes nothing. Not your suffering, not your failures, not your delays, not even the mistakes you regret. God has a way of taking broken pieces and turning them into part of a greater purpose. And many people watching this are in a season where God is trying to wake them up spiritually, because deep down, you know you were created for more than just surviving. You were not created to spend your entire life chasing temporary things while ignoring the condition of your soul. You were created to live with eternal purpose. And when God becomes first, confusion slowly starts turning into clarity. You begin making decisions differently. You stop following every distraction. You stop comparing your journey to everyone else's timeline. You stop panicking because your life does not look like someone else's success story. Because now you understand that purpose requires process. And sometimes God allows isolation, delays, and difficult seasons not to destroy you, but to prepare you for who you are becoming. This is why some of the strongest people spiritually are those who survived seasons that almost made them quit. Purpose gives meaning to pain. A person with purpose can survive storms that would completely destroy someone without direction. And when you truly begin walking with God, you no longer live only for temporary pleasure or human approval. You begin living with the awareness that your life carries assignment, meaning, and impact beyond what you can currently see. And that realization changes everything, because once a person discovers purpose through God, they stop wandering through life blindly and start walking with direction, conviction, and spiritual clarity. So what happens when you put God first? Peace replaces fear. Transformation replaces bondage. Favor replaces striving. Identity replaces insecurity. Purpose replaces confusion. But here is the truth many people ignore. Putting God first is not just a feeling. It is a decision, a daily decision, a decision to seek Him even when distracted, to trust Him even when uncertain, to obey Him even when uncomfortable. And the beautiful thing is this: God does not ask for first place because He wants to control you. He asks for first place because He knows nothing else can truly satisfy your soul. The world will promise fulfillment and still leave people empty. But God changes a person from the inside out. And maybe that is why this message found you today. Because deep down, you already know something in your life needs to move out of first place. And perhaps your breakthrough begins the moment God finally takes that place in your heart.